My name is Ruth Harper, and the night my life changed forever started with something as small as the creak of an old hallway floorboard. The house was quiet in that cozy, heavy way it gets after dinner. The TV was turned down low in the living room, a rerun murmuring to itself. I could still smell the roast chicken I'd made earlier, mixed with a faint bitterness of coffee cooling in the pot. I remember thinking I might pour myself one last cup before bed. Just a small comfort. I slipped my feet into my worn slippers and padded down the hallway, one hand on the wall the way I always did, more out of habit than need. The nightlight in the hall cast a soft yellow puddle on the carpet. From the kitchen, I heard the hum of the refrigerator and the soft clink of glass. Kelly's laugh floated out first, low practice, the kind of laugh she used when she wanted something. I didn't think much of it at first. Then I heard her voice, sharper, lower. She must have been on speakerphone because it carried clearly through the half-closed kitchen door. "She won't be around much longer," she whispered, but the words were crisp, as if she'd rehearsed them. "So we just have to hold on. A few more months. That's it." I stopped so fast my slipper slid on the carpet. For a second I thought I'd misheard. Maybe she was talking about a neighbor, an aunt, anyone else. But then there was a pause. The quiet kind where you can hear someone smiling. Ice clinked against the side of a glass. Kelly gave a little chuckle. "Trust me," she murmured. "Once she's gone, everything will be easier." My hand tightened on the wall. The hallway tilted just a bit. In my own house, with my own coffee pot still warm on the counter, I stood there listening to my daughter-in-law speak about some woman as if she were an obstacle, as if she were already halfway in the grave. The floorboard under my right foot betrayed me. It let out that long, complaining creak I'd known for 30 years. The one Daniel used to jump on when he was little just to make me laugh. The talking stopped. I heard the faint rustle of fabric, the soft scrape of a chair being pushed back. Then Kelly's voice, bright again, too bright. "Okay, I'll call you later," she said quickly. "Bye." I stepped back into the shadow by the hallway wall. My heart thudded so hard it almost drowned out the click of her ending the call. My chest felt tight, like someone had pulled the belt around my ribs. I waited, holding my breath. A moment later, Kelly's footsteps crossed the kitchen floor. The light under the door shifted. She didn't come out, though. She just stood there, listening. I stared at the framed photos on the wall across from me. Daniel as a toddler with cake on his face. Daniel at 10, holding a fishing pole twice his size. Daniel at 25, standing stiffly in a suit at some cousin's wedding. Every photo I owned had his face in it, one way or another. When did my home stop feeling safe? When did my son's visits start to feel more like inspections and family time? When did I begin to wonder if the people I loved were counting down my days? I backed away from the doorway, moving as quietly as my old knees would allow, and turned into the living room. The TV flickered blue light across the couch. My coffee sat on the end table, a thin film on top now. I lowered myself into my usual spot and stared at the blank space on the wall where my late husband's favorite painting used to hang before Daniel convinced me to store it somewhere safe. I listened to my own heartbeat in my ears. "She won't be around much longer." The words rolled over and over in my mind, heavier each time. I tried to convince myself it wasn't me. I failed. A few minutes later, the front door clicked. Cold evening air rushed in, carrying the smell of rain and exhaust from the street. I heard Daniel's voice, cheerful, familiar. "Hey, Mom." He leaned down and kissed my cheek, his jacket still cool from outside. He smelled like aftershave and a hint of cigarette smoke he thought I didn't notice. "Did you miss us?" he joked, dropping his keys into the bowl by the door. Behind him, Kelly walked in carrying a grocery bag. Her blonde hair was neatly tied back, her lipstick perfect. She gave me that sweet open smile that had charmed me the first time we met, but her eyes flickered just for a second. She walked behind Daniel, brushed her hand over his back, and leaned toward him as she passed. "Just a few more months," she whispered, so softly I almost thought I imagined it. I didn't. I felt every syllable land like a stone in my stomach. I didn't sleep much that night. The house groaned and settled the way old houses do, but every sound felt sharper. The heater kicked on with a cough. Rain ticked against the bedroom window, soft and steady. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between each crack of the wooden beams. I've always believed that being a good mother meant being available, answering calls at midnight, opening your door to surprise visits, saying yes more than no. That's what I told myself anyway. For years, this house was full of life. When my husband, Mark, was alive, Sunday mornings smelled like bacon and coffee and worn-in aftershave. The radio would be playing some old song from the 70s while he stood at the stove flipping pancakes, humming off-key. Daniel would come barreling into the kitchen in his socks, sliding across the linoleum, begging for chocolate chips in his pancakes. I used to stand at the sink, hands in the warm dishwater, watching those two. My whole world in two mismatched t-shirts. Back then, love felt simple. Then Mark was gone. A heart attack at work, sudden and cruel. One phone call on a gray afternoon, and everything shifted. The house felt bigger, quieter, colder. It was just me and Daniel after that. Early mornings making pancakes alone, the radio radio turned down low, driving him to school in our old blue sedan that rattled at every red light. I remember singing to keep myself from crying at the wheel. I remember promising myself that as long as Daniel was okay, I would be okay. I worked double shifts at the grocery store, then took on some bookkeeping from home for a local mechanic. I learned how to stretch $1 until it squeaked. No vacations, no new clothes unless something had holes. Most nights I went to bed exhausted but grateful that the lights were still on and there was food in the fridge. When Daniel got into community college, I nearly burst with pride. We celebrated with takeout pizza on paper plates at the same kitchen table. He told me, "One day, Mom, I'm going to buy you a little house on the beach so you never have to worry again." I believed him. Of course I did. He met Kelly a few years later. Pretty polite, always bringing some dessert from a bakery when she visited. She called me Mom almost from the beginning. First it made my heart swell, but little things started to pile up. She always forgot her wallet when we went out to dinner, so the bill slid naturally toward me. When they got their first apartment, she sighed and said, "Rent is so high these days, it's impossible for young couples to get ahead," and looked at me as if the problem were mine to solve. I told myself it was just a rough patch, just until they got on their feet. I offered to help with their rent for 6 months. 6 months turned into a year, then 2, then 3. I co-signed on a small car loan because Daniel said his old car kept breaking down on the highway. I paid off a credit card when Kelly had an emergency dental procedure. When they talked about trying for a baby and IVF costs came up, I quietly dipped into my small retirement account to help. "We'll pay you back, Mom," Daniel said, kissing my forehead. "We'll make sure you're taken care of when you're older." I wanted to believe that more than anything. I pushed away the little sting I felt whenever Kelly joked, "Don't worry, Daniel, we'll inherit it all anyway." She said it with a laugh, but I saw the way her eyes calculated when she walked around my house, lingering on the furniture, the old painting, the jewelry box in my bedroom. My pantry slowly changed. For them, I bought organic pasta and nice wine when they came over. For myself, I stuck to tuna, rice, frozen vegetables, and discount cereal. I repaired my sweaters instead of buying new ones. I canceled a bus trip to the coast with a senior group because Kelly and Daniel were a bit short this month. Every sacrifice felt small in the moment. That's how sacrifice works. Piece by piece, you hand yourself over and tell yourself it's love. That night, after hearing Kelly in the kitchen on the phone, I decided to see it all in black and white. Numbers don't lie. People do. I went into the kitchen after they left, the house finally quiet again. The clock on the stove glowed green at nearly midnight. I pulled open the drawer where I kept my checkbook and bank statements and carried them to the kitchen table. The overhead light made everything look harsher, even my hands. I sat there for an hour, maybe 2, flipping through pages, jotting down amounts on a yellow notepad. Rent contributions, car payments, credit card bailouts, small loans that never came back, cash withdrawals I made just to help this month. By the time I added it up, my coffee was ice cold. The number at the bottom of the page stared back at me, more than I had imagined. Enough to cover my medical care for years if anything ever happened. Enough to take the trip to the coast 10 times over. My chest tightened, but this time it wasn't grief. It was anger. Slow spreading anger. She won't be around much longer. If that was how my daughter-in-law was talking about me while sipping wine in my kitchen, if that was what my son was hearing and not stopping, what exactly did they think was going to happen to me? The next few days, I tried to tell myself I was overreacting. I cleaned the house like I always did. I made my morning toast and coffee. I watched my silly morning shows. I watered the fern in the living room that refuses to die, no matter how much I neglect it. But my senses felt sharper. Every smell, every sound. I paid attention. The first accident happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Daniel and Kelly had dropped by for lunch. Kelly insisted on helping in the kitchen, which was unusual. Normally she sat at the table scrolling on her phone while I cooked. "I'll refill your pill organizer," she said brightly. When she saw my little plastic box near the sink, "You shouldn't be fussing with these tiny things with your hands." I told her I could manage, but she had already scooped up the bottles. She moved quickly, too quickly, and kept her back turned to me. I heard the rattle of pills, the flick of plastic lids, her soft humming. Later that night, when I went to take my blood pressure medicine, I noticed the bottle felt wrong. The pills looked a little different. Same size, but the color seemed off somehow. The label was my usual pharmacy, my name printed clearly, but something in my gut twisted. I held one up under the yellow kitchen light. It had a faint chemical smell, more bitter than usual. Or maybe my imagination was running wild. I ended up taking half a dose, then lying awake most of the night, listening to my own heartbeat. 2 days later, I came into the kitchen to find the front burner of the stove still on. Barely, but on. Just a whisper of blue flame under an empty pot. I know I turned it off after making soup. I always double check. It's the thing you become obsessive about when you're older. "Kelly," I asked casually that afternoon when she stopped by with Daniel, "did either of you reheat something earlier?" She blinked then smiled. "I checked the stove for you before we left last time," she said. "You really shouldn't cook so much, Ruth. It's dangerous when you're tired. Dangerous. The words sat heavy between us. Then there was the bath mat. On Saturday morning, I stepped out of the shower, expecting soft cotton under my feet. Instead, my heel hit cold slick tile. My foot slipped forward. For a second, I saw the ceiling. I grabbed the towel rack just in time, my shoulder screaming in protest. The bath mat was bunched up behind the door, as if someone had kicked it aside. I stood there, dripping, heart pounding, the steam curling around my head. If I had fallen, I could have broken my hip. I could have lain there alone for hours. When I told Daniel about it on the phone, he chuckled gently. Mom, you're scaring yourself, he said. You've been so stressed. We've been saying for a while that maybe it's time to think about assisted living, just so you're safe. Kelly found a great brochure. I'm fine in my house, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Well, he said, that note of patience creeping in. We just worry. You forget things, like the stove. I stared at the turned-off burner as he said it. I could see my own reflection in the stainless steel surface. I looked tired, but not crazy. At night, the house started to feel like a stranger. The heater's old rattle sounded like footsteps. The refrigerator's hum vibrated in my bones. Sometimes I smelled gas, faint and ghost-like, and I'd get out of bed, heart racing, to go check every knob on the stove. One evening, while washing dishes, I heard Kelly's voice again. She and Daniel were in the living room, the TV muted. The smell of his cologne drifted to me with the scent of the dish soap. I heard the beep of her phone, then her cheerful tone. Yes, I'm calling about the policy, she said. Right, the life insurance on my mother-in-law. I froze, my hands submerged in hot water. The plate I was holding slid from my fingers, clinking against the sink. Yes, she went on, as if she were ordering curtains. Her name is Ruth Harper. I just wanted to confirm the details. The policy is active as long as she's living in her home, correct? And the payout, right, in case anything happens to her. The glass I was holding this time slid from my wet fingers and shattered in the sink. The sound was sharp, violent. Crack in reality. In case anything happens to her. To me, in my own kitchen, with my hands in my own sink, I finally understood that maybe nothing in my life had been an accident for a long time. Once you hear someone calmly discuss your death as a paperwork detail, something in you changes. Fear doesn't vanish. It hardens, starts to grow a spine. I realized I couldn't just tell people what was happening. Who would believe me? A 70-year-old woman thinks her sweet, helpful daughter-in-law is trying to get rid of her. It sounds like a bad plot from a TV movie. A few days later, I was out on my front porch, sweeping the steps, when my neighbor Linda called out from across the street. She was wrestling with a package bigger than she was. It was one of those chilly afternoons where you can smell leaves and exhaust at the same time. You need help with that? I asked, lowering my broom. She laughed. Only if you know how to handle stubborn cardboard, she said. We met halfway and tackled the box together, grunting and muttering. Inside, it turned out to be a new doorbell camera system her son had ordered for her. He says I have to record every delivery, she joked. You never know when someone will try to rip you off, Mom. These kids and their scams. Something in my chest flickered. Recording. Proof. That night, alone at my kitchen table with the overhead light buzzing faintly, I picked up my smartphone. I'd never been good with these things, but I knew how to do one simple trick. Voice memos. I opened the app, stared at the red circle, and pressed record, just in case. The next time Kelly came over and offered to help with my pills, I set my phone on the counter, screen dark, microphone live. Her voice came through clear. Honestly, Ruth, at your age, you could probably use a stronger dose at night, she said lightly. If you slept more, you'd be less anxious. I can ask the doctor to change the prescription for you. But my doctor said the current dose is enough, I replied. Doctors don't see what we see, she murmured. We're with you more. We know when you're confused. My stomach twisted. I pictured that recording sitting quietly on my phone, a tiny piece of truth. Over the next 2 weeks, I recorded everything I could. Half arguments in the living room, Kelly hissing. The policy only pays if she's still living here, Daniel. We can't rush anything. It has to look natural. Daniel sighing. I just want this over with. We're drowning. Once the house is ours. I forced my face to stay calm when I walked into the room, pretending I hadn't heard. Inside, I was shaking, but some part of me was also taking notes. I started writing down dates and strange events on a small notepad I kept in my robe pocket. Burner left on. Pills moved. Bath mat missing. Anytime I smelled gas. Anytime Kelly brought up how sad it would be if I had to go into a home. Finally, I did something I should have done months earlier. I went to see my doctor. Alone. I told Daniel I had a hair appointment. Instead, I drove my old car to Dr. Patel's office, hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual. The waiting room smelled like antiseptic and coffee. A daytime talk show murmured from a wall-mounted TV. When Dr. Patel walked in, she smiled warmly. Ruth, it's been a while, she said. What brings you in today? I wanted to sound calm. I knew I didn't. I think, I said slowly, that someone might be trying to make me look crazy, or sick, or both. She didn't laugh. She didn't dismiss me. Instead, her her eyebrows knitted together. "Tell me," she said. I told her everything. The pill bottles, the stove, the bath mat, the life insurance policy I'd never signed up for, the whisper. She won't be around much longer. She ordered a full panel of blood tests, checked my medications, then sat across from me with her hands folded. "Your labs are actually quite good," she said later, flipping through the results. "For your age, your health is stable. Your blood pressure is controlled with the current dose. There is absolutely no medical reason to increase your sedatives." She looked at me over her glasses. "I'm going to make a note in your file," she added quietly, "that no changes to your prescription should be made without your presence and consent. Do you understand?" I nodded. My throat was tight. When I left the office, the sky was a heavy gray, the kind that makes everything look flat. Instead of going home, I drove to the bank. The parking lot was half empty. Inside, the air smelled like printer ink and hand sanitizer. I asked to speak to someone about my accounts. A young man with a kind face, Ethan, led me to a small glass-walled office and pulled up my information on a screen. "How can I help you today, Mrs. Harper?" "I'd like to review any lines of credit in my name," I said. "All of them." He scrolled, eyes moving quickly. Then he frowned. "There's a home equity line that was opened last year," he said. "About $40,000 available. You've drawn almost half." My fingers went numb. I had never in my life opened any such line. "Can I see the paperwork?" I whispered. He printed it. I recognized my address, my social security number, my full name, and a signature at the bottom that looked almost like mine. Almost. Ethan hesitated. "I shouldn't really comment," he said quietly, "but this looks a bit inconsistent with your other signatures on file." Inconsistent, a polite word for forged. I walked out to my car, clutching the papers, the wind whipping my hair around my face. I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the gray sky through the windshield. She won't be around much longer. Now I knew why that sentence had sounded less like grief and more like anticipation. After a long time, I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. My fingers were trembling, but I unlocked my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't used in years. "Harris Law Office." The receptionist answered when the call connected. "Hi," I said, hearing my own voice shake. "My name is Ruth Harper. Your boss helped my husband and me with our will a long time ago." "Yes, I see your file here. How can we help you, Mrs. Harper?" I took a breath that felt like it came from the soles of my feet. "I think," I said, "my son and his wife are planning something terrible, and I have proof." Attorney Michael Harris's office smelled like old books and fresh coffee. There was a little plant in the corner that looked like it was barely hanging on, and a framed photo on his desk of two teenagers at a beach. The blinds were half open, letting in that soft, dusty light you only get in mid-afternoon. He looked older than I remembered. We both were, but his eyes were the same, sharp and kind at the same time. "Ruth," he said, standing to shake my hand. "It's been a long time. I'm sorry it's under these circumstances." I sat down and placed my stack of papers and my phone on his desk. "I don't know where to start," I admitted, "so I'm just going to start at the worst part." I told him about the whisper in the hallway, about the life insurance policy, about the accidents in my house, the forged line of credit, the recordings of Kelly and Daniel talking as if my death were a financial plan. He didn't interrupt. He just took notes, his pen moving steadily. When I played the recordings, the air in the room seemed to thin. "Policy only pays if she's still living here. Once the house is ours." When the last recording ended, the silence hummed. He let out a slow breath. "This," he said carefully, "is elder financial abuse, and if those accidents escalate, it could become something much worse. You were right to come." Something in me crumpled with relief and horror. I wasn't crazy, but that meant the nightmare was real. "What do?" I asked. I hated how small my voice sounded. "We start by protecting you," he said. "We document everything, from the money you willingly gave them to the things they took without consent. We notify the bank. We lock down your accounts. We update your will and revoke any old powers of attorney. And we make sure that if they try to claim you're incompetent, we have medical proof that you're not." His tone was calm, but his jaw was tight. "Ruth, people don't like losing access to free money. Once they realize the tap is turned off, they'll react." I finished for him. He nodded. "Be ready. They won't let their investment walk away quietly." We spent the next 2 hours going through my finances, every transfer to Daniel, every payment I'd made for them. He whistled quietly when he totaled the amount. "With this," he said softly, "you could have lived comfortably, traveled, upgraded your home. Instead, you were propping up 2 adults who should have been supporting themselves." He drafted letters to the bank, to my pharmacy, to my primary doctor. He updated my will so that any inheritance would be placed in a trust with conditions, not handed over directly. He showed me how to set up text alerts for any unexpected activity on my accounts. "Do you have anyone nearby you trust?" he asked at the end. "Friend, neighbor, church member?" I thought of Linda's laugh as we wrestled that package, her son insisting she needed a camera to feel safe, the way she'd always waved from across the street street but never pushed herself into my life. My neighbor, I said slowly. Her name is Linda. We've never been close, but she's kind, and she knows what it's like to be on her own. Talk to her, he advised. Let someone know what's happening. Not to scare you, but if anything strange happens, you want a witness who's not on their side. When I got home, the late day sun was starting to dip, throwing long shadows across my front yard. Linda was out front pruning her rose bushes, her porch light already flicked on even though it wasn't dark yet. I stood on my side of the street for a moment, clutching my purse. Then I took a breath and crossed. Hey Ruth, she said, straightening up. Everything okay? I swallowed. Do you have a minute? I asked. I think I might need a friend. She wiped her hands on her gardening apron and nodded toward her porch. For you, she said. I've got all the minutes you need. We sat on her front steps with mugs of tea that smelled like chamomile and honey. The street lights flickered on one by one. I told her my story, all of it. When I finally stopped talking, my throat dry and my hands cold, I braced myself for doubt, for a polite smile, for a gentle, maybe you're just stressed, Ruth. Instead, Linda's eyes glistened with anger on my behalf. My sister went through something similar, she said quietly. Her son tried to get control of her money by saying she was unstable. You're not imagining this. You're not alone. Her words wrapped around me like a warm blanket. She reached into her pocket and dangled a key in front of me. This is the spare to my house, she said. If you ever feel unsafe day or night, you come over. Don't call first. Just walk in. And if I ever see anything off over there, you can bet I'll be on the phone and I'll back you up. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than fear. I felt held, not by my son, not by my daughter-in-law, by a neighbor who owed me nothing and believed me anyway. When I went to bed that night, the house still creaked inside like always, but this time as I lay there listening, I knew I wasn't the only one listening back. Someone else finally knew the truth, and somewhere in the dark, I knew Daniel and Kelly were about to find out that the bank account they'd been living off wasn't theirs anymore. I didn't have to wait long. It was a Wednesday afternoon when the storm hit, not the weather, though clouds were building outside, thick and low over the neighborhood. This storm walked in through my front door. I was sitting at the kitchen table, going through some recipes I collected over the years, when I heard the rumble of a car pulling into my driveway faster than usual. Tires crunched on gravel. Doors slammed. The front door burst open without a knock. Daniel strode in first, face flushed, jaw tight. Kelly followed, her lips pressed in a line, a folder tucked under her arm. We need to talk, Daniel said, not even bothering with hello. My heart sped up, but my hand stayed on my recipe book. Of course, I said evenly. What's wrong? What's wrong? Kelly snapped. What's wrong is the bank just told us the transfer stopped. Our rent is due, Ruth. The car payment is due. The credit card you ran up in my name, I said quietly. She blinked. Daniel shot her a quick look, then turned back to me. Mom, this isn't funny, he said. The automatic transfers are gone, and your accounts are locked down. Mr. Harris was there this morning. What are you doing? I'm protecting myself, I replied. And my money. Kelly let out a brittle laugh. Protecting yourself from your own family? She scoffed. We're the only ones who care what happens to you. The words felt like a slap. I thought of Linda's spare key, Dr. Patel's careful notes, Ethan at the bank, frowning at my forged signature, Harris's steady voice. No, I said softly. You're the ones who care what happens to my accounts. Their faces shifted. Kelly's eyes narrowed. Daniel's cheeks reddened. Mom, he said, suddenly adopting a softer tone, the one he used when he wanted to talk me into something. You've been really stressed lately. We've noticed. Forgetting things. Getting confused. You left the stove on. You nearly fell in the bathroom. We're worried about you. Kelly placed the folder on the table and opened it with a little flourish. Inside were neatly stacked papers, tabs, stickers. Daniel and I spoke to a lawyer, she said. He's helping us make sure you're safe. All you have to do is sign here. I glanced at the document on top. Durable power of attorney stared back at me in bold letters. Lines for my name. For Daniel's name. If you sign, Kelly went on sweetly, Daniel can handle all the stressful financial stuff for you. Bills, accounts, everything. You can just relax, Ruth. Isn't that what you've always wanted? I looked up at my son. The same brown eyes he'd had when he was 5, begging for one more cookie. Now they were harder, sharper. Do you know, I asked quietly, how much money I've given you in the last 3 years? He hesitated. Mom, that's not the point. 32,000 and some change, I said. Rent, car, cars, cash. I added it up. That was my comfort, my trips, my doctor visits. And now, on top of all that, someone opened a line of credit on my house for $40,000 with a signature that looks like mine but isn't. Silence. Just the ticking of the clock on the wall. And then, I continued, my voice steady now, I overhear my daughter-in-law telling someone she won't be around much longer. Kelly's nostrils flared. That was taken out of context, she snapped. I tilted my head. It would help, I said, if you could give me a context where that sentence sounds kind. Daniel slammed his hand on the table. Enough, he barked. "You're twisting everything. You're not well, Mom. We're trying to help you. We talked to a social worker. If you don't sign this, they might have to get involved." "What you're doing," I replied, "is trying to make me look incompetent so you can take what doesn't belong to you." Kelly's eyes flashed. "You really shouldn't talk like that, Ruth," she said in a low voice. "It sounds paranoid." The air in the room felt thick. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, but I remembered Harris's words. I wasn't alone. "I won't sign," I said simply. They tried sweet voices, then guilt, then anger again. Finally, Kelly snapped the folder shut with a sharp crack. "You're making a huge mistake," she hissed. "You think that lawyer is on your side? He just wants your money. At least we're family." "Family doesn't stand in a hallway discussing life insurance payouts," I said. Daniel grabbed the folder and stormed toward the door. Kelly lingered just a second longer. She leaned over the table, bringing her face close to mine. Her perfume was too sweet, cloying. "You can't stop what's coming," she murmured. "You're getting older. The state doesn't like it when old ladies get confused. We're only trying to help them see that." Then she was gone. The front door slammed. The house shuddered. That night, the doorbell rang just after dinner. When I checked my new camera feed on my phone, the one Linda's son had helped me install, there was a woman on my porch, mid-30s, smart blazer, clipboard in hand. I opened the door just enough to be polite. "Mrs. Harper?" she asked with a practiced professional smile. "My name is Jenna. I'm a social worker with Adult Protective Services. We received some concerns from your family about your well-being. Would you mind if I came in and asked you a few questions?" My heart dropped, but my spine straightened. So this was their next move. "I'd be happy to answer questions," I said, "but I'd like my attorney present. You can come in and wait while I call him." Her eyebrows rose just a little. "Of course," she said, "if you prefer." We sat in the living room. The ticking clock sounded too loud. I called Harris and explained the situation in a low voice. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said. "Don't let her pressure you into anything until I arrive." While we waited, Jenna went through her script. "Your son and daughter-in-law report that you've been leaving appliances on," she said, "that you've become paranoid about them, that you've accused them of trying to harm you. They're concerned you might be declining mentally and being influenced by outsiders." Outsiders. I thought of Linda's tea, Dr. Patel's steady eyes, Ethan's quiet concern, Harris's cramped little office. "I'm not declining," I replied, "and if I am paranoid, I've earned it." She tried to keep her face neutral, but I saw something flicker there. Doubt. When Harris arrived, the energy in the room shifted. He shook Jenna's hand, presented his card, and calmly laid out my medical records, the bank's concerns about my forged line of credit, and the recordings edited for the most damning parts. Jenna listened. She took notes. She got quieter and quieter. By the time she left, she was the one looking troubled. "I'll need to file a full report," she said, "but based on what I've seen today, Mrs. Harper, you appear perfectly capable of making your own decisions." After she walked out, closing the door softly behind her, I sank onto the couch. My legs felt weak, but there was a new steadiness in my chest. "Brace yourself," Harris said, gathering his papers. "They're not going to stop here. The next step is court. They'll try to get guardianship, legal control of everything. We're going to be ready." That night, in the glow of my table lamp, I watched the camera feed on my phone. Daniel and Kelly's car idled at the end of my driveway. They sat inside with a man in a dark suit I didn't recognize. Their faces were tense, animated. The man held a stack of papers. My phone buzzed. A text from Harris. "They filed for guardianship today," it read. "They want legal control of your life." I set the phone down, my hands trembling. Everything in me wanted to collapse. Instead, I took a deep breath and walked to my bedroom mirror. The woman looking back at me had wrinkles and tired eyes, but her gaze was clear, harder than it used to be. "They want my life," I whispered to my reflection. "They're about to find out I'm still very much alive." The courtroom smelled faintly of old paper and disinfectant. The overhead lights were too bright, making everything look washed out. I sat at the wooden table next to Harris, my hands folded tightly in my lap. My best black suit, the one I'd saved for my working days, felt a little snug around my shoulders. Across the aisle, Daniel and Kelly were seated with their lawyer. Daniel wore a new suit that didn't quite fit right. Kelly was in a black dress, hair pulled back, eyes carefully lined to look wide and innocent. From a distance, they could have passed as a couple attending a funeral. In a way, I suppose they were. "Remember," Harris murmured, "they have the burden of proof. They have to show you're incompetent. We just have to show you're not." I nodded, my heart beat like a drum in my ears, but my mind felt surprisingly clear. I thought of the years I'd spent balancing grocery store receipts and school fees, late nights paying bills at this same kitchen table. I had managed my life alone for a long time. I refused to let them erase that. The judge entered, robes swishing, and we all stood. He was a tall man with a calm, lined face and eyes that had seen far too many sad families. "Be seated," he said. Daniel's lawyer went first. He painted a picture of me as a confused, elderly woman being manipulated by outsiders with unknown motives. He talked about my irrational decision to cut off off financial support, my sudden distrust of my loving son and daughter-in-law, my paranoid installation of cameras and security measures. He used clinical words: decline, confusion, vulnerability, all carefully wrapped in concern. When Kelly took a stand, she cried on cue. Her voice trembled as she described how I had changed. She was always like a second mom to me, she said, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. But lately, she accuses us of horrible things. She says we're trying to hurt her. We would never. We just wanted to help her get proper care. We're scared she'll hurt herself or lose everything. I watched the judge's face. He listened without reacting. I couldn't read him. When Harris stood for cross-examination, his voice was mild. Mrs. Parker, he said, using her married name. When was the last time you called Mrs. Harper here and did not ask for money, help with bills, or use of her credit? She blinked. I don't remember exact dates, she said. Can you remember any instance in the last year? He pressed gently. Just one call, one visit that was purely social? Silence. Her throat bobbed. And is it true, he continued, flipping through his notes, that you and your husband purchased a life insurance policy on Mrs. Harper without her knowledge, listing yourselves as beneficiaries? That's standard planning, she blurted. People do that all the time. People, Harris said, do not usually discuss those policies by saying, she won't be around much longer, so we just have to hold on. Kelly went pale. How do you? We'll get to that, Harris said calmly. Daniel's testimony was more painful. Hearing my own son talk about me as if I were a problem to be managed, a burden cut deeper than any legal argument. Mom has always been generous, he said, but lately she's just not herself. She forgets things. She makes wild accusations. We're worried someone is putting ideas in her head. We just want to make sure she's safe and that her finances are handled responsibly. Harris's cross-examination was precise. How much money has your mother given you in the last 3 years, Mr. Harper? I don't know. A few thousand, Daniel muttered. Harris held up a folder. Would $32,000 sound more accurate? Daniel shifted in his seat. She insisted on helping, he said. How many times, Harris asked, have you visited your mother's home simply to spend time with her, without expecting a meal, money, or some form of help? No answer. Is it true, Harris went on, that you and your wife visited your mother's bank and attempted to gain information on her accounts without her present? Daniel's lawyer objected. The judge overruled. Daniel cleared his throat. We were worried, he said. We just wanted to make sure her bills were paid. Her bills, Harris repeated. Or yours. By the time it was our turn, my hands had stopped shaking. I watched Dr. Patel testify calmly that I was mentally sound, my cognitive tests solid, my health stable. I watched Ethan from the bank explain that my signature on the home equity line was inconsistent with every other sample they had. I watched Linda take the stand and tell the court, in her no-nonsense way, about my clarity, my planning, my fear, and the car in my driveway at all hours. Finally, it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand on legs that felt both heavy and strong. The oath felt oddly comforting. Swearing to tell the truth was the easiest part of this whole ordeal. Harris kept his questions simple. How have you managed your finances for the last 40 years, Mrs. Harper? On my own, I said. I paid off a mortgage, sent my son to school, saved for retirement, paid every bill on time. I held 2 jobs after my husband died. I've never declared bankruptcy. I've never defaulted on a loan. Why did you give your son and daughter-in-law so much money? He asked. Because I love my son, I answered. Because I thought if I helped him enough, he'd feel safe. And maybe he'd stay close. I believe that being a good mother meant always saying yes. Why did you stop? I swallowed. Because I realized I wasn't a mother to them. I was an income stream. They didn't visit unless they needed something. When I overheard my daughter-in-law say, she won't be around much longer, it finally hit me. They weren't planning for my future. They were planning for my absence. Harris nodded and sat down. Daniel's lawyer tried to trip me up, asking the same questions in different ways, suggesting that maybe I'd misheard, exaggerated, become confused. But I knew my own story. For the first time in a long time, I trusted my memory. Then Harris played the recordings. Kelly's voice filled the silent courtroom. The policy only pays if she's still living there. We just have to hold on until she's gone. The judge's jaw tightened. Daniel stared straight ahead, knuckles white. Kelly's eyes filled with tears, not of guilt but of being caught. When closing arguments ended, the judge called a recess. We waited in the hallway, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. My knees ached, but I stayed standing. I watched Daniel pace at the far end of the hall, Kelly hissing in his ear. At one point, he looked up. For a split second, our eyes met. I saw something there. Not the little boy who used to slide in his socks on my kitchen floor, but not a stranger either. Just a man who had lost his way so badly he couldn't even see it. The judge's decision was mercifully short. After reviewing the evidence, he said when we reconvened, it is the opinion of this court that Mrs. Ruth Harper is in full possession of her mental faculties. She demonstrates consistent decision-making, financial understanding, and awareness of her circumstances. He turned his gaze toward Daniel and Kelly. Furthermore, the court is deeply concerned by the plaintiff's financial dependence on the respondent, the forged banking documents, and the recorded discussions regarding life insurance policies and the respondent's mortality. These raise serious questions about the plaintiff's motivations. He shuffled his papers. The petition for guardianship is denied in full. Protective orders will be put in place preventing the plaintiffs from accessing the respondent's financial accounts without explicit documented consent. This matter may be referred for further investigation regarding potential fraud. His gavel came down with a sharp crack. It sounded like a door slamming shut. As we walked out of the courtroom, relief washed over me, almost dizzying. Not joy, not yet, just release. At the top of the courthouse steps, I paused. The sun was out now, bright and unapologetic. Harris squeezed my shoulder. "You did it," he said. "You protected yourself." Behind us, Daniel came out, his tie askew. He hesitated, then walked a little closer. "Mom," he started, voice raw. "We were just scared of being adults," I said softly. He winced. I waited for an apology that never came. Instead, he shook his head. "Fine," he muttered. "Have it your way." Kelly tugged at his arm, eyes burning holes into me. They walked away together, down the steps, toward a future that didn't include my money or me. The judge's words echoed in my mind as we left. "You get to decide who is in your life." For the first time in a very long time, that choice was truly mine. Months later, my life looks nothing like it did the night I heard that whisper in the hallway. The big old house is gone. I sold it. I thought it would break my heart to sign those papers, but when I handed over the keys, I felt lighter, as if I were finally putting down a load I'd been carrying far too long. Now I live in a small apartment on the 3rd floor of a brick building near the city center. In the mornings, when I open my windows, I smell coffee from the cafe downstairs and fresh bread from the bakery across the street. Sometimes I just stand there, breathing it in, letting the warmth of it fill spaces that used to be full of fear. I bought myself a small round table for the kitchen, just big enough for two. Not for Daniel and Kelly, for me and whoever I choose to invite in. Friends from my new art class, Linda when she visits, and we gossip about our neighbors like teenagers. On the balcony, I keep pots of herbs, basil, rosemary, thyme. They brush against each other in the breeze, releasing their scents. It's a simple thing, but it feels like a luxury to sprinkle fresh basil on my pasta, knowing I paid for every leaf myself. I volunteer twice a week at a community center, helping other seniors fill out their forms, read their bank statements, understand their rights. Sometimes I see that same mix of shame and confusion I once had, the look of someone who's given too much and been thanked too little. I tell them gently, saying no doesn't make you a bad parent. It makes you a person. I haven't heard directly from Daniel or Kelly since the court date. Once in a while, news reaches me in sideways ways. A neighbor mentions that they had to move to a smaller apartment. Linda's son says he saw Kelly working at a store in the mall. Maybe they're learning finally what it means to stand on their own. Maybe not, but that's their story now, not mine. Some nights I sit in my living room with a cup of tea, the soft lamp casting a warm circle of light. I pull out an old photo album and flip through pages. There's one picture I always pause on. Me younger, hair darker, holding baby Daniel in my arms in the hospital, his tiny hand gripping my finger like he would never let go. I hope you find your way. I whisper to that picture sometimes. I hope you become the man you were meant to be. But I can't lose myself trying to drag you there. I've learned something hard and beautiful. Love without respect is just emotional debt. You can pour everything you have into people who see you as a stepping stone, and they will still tell themselves they deserve more. The only person you are truly responsible for loving and protecting from beginning to end is yourself. If someone you love ever speaks about you the way Kelly spoke about me, like you're already gone, like your life is just a pile of future paperwork, believe what you heard. Believe what they show you in their actions, not what they say when they want something. You are not an investment. You are not a walking wallet. You're a human being with a heart that deserves gentleness. Now, when I lock my door at night, the click of the deadbolt makes me feel safe, not trapped. I brew my tea, turn on some soft music, and let the quiet fill the room. It's not the heavy silence of being ignored. It's the peaceful silence of finally being enough for myself. If you've stayed with me all the way through this story, thank you. Really, it means something to me that you listened. I'm curious, what would you have done in my place? Would you have believed the whisper the first time you heard it? Would you have kept giving? Or would you have drawn your line sooner? Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what part of this story stayed with you. If you want to hear more real-life stories like mine about boundaries, betrayal, and finding your way back to yourself, please remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notifications so you don't miss the next one. Until then, take care of your heart, protect your peace, and never forget, you are worth more than what anyone can take from you.